Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Technology Tools to Improve Organ Acceptance. We're so pleased that you could all join us as we have what's sure to be an informative presentation in store for you today. My name is Deanna Fenton, Program Manager here at the Alliance, and it is my pleasure to host today's webinar. Before we begin today's presentation, there are just a few housekeeping items that I'd like to review. First and foremost, for optimal visual and audio experience, please access these webinars using the Chrome browser. If at any point you encounter any issues, we do recommend logging back in using Chrome. If you're already using Chrome or continue to experience these issues, please try dialing in using the phone number that was provided in your confirmation email. Now, to those of you who are joining us for the very first time today, please take note of the chat feature that's located at the very bottom left-hand corner of your screen. This chat can be used to pose your questions to our speakers. So if you have any questions that come up during the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit them at any time. Once the presentation has concluded, we'll have some time for our presenters to address as many of your questions as time allows. For anyone interested in our upcoming webinars, please note registration is currently open for our next webinar, Determining Eligibility of Blood Type B Candidates for Transplant with Blood Type A2 Kidneys. That's coming your way on October 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Registration is also open for our upcoming webinar, Strategies for Success, Navigating Access to Electronic Medical Records. Be sure to join us for that on November 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern. For more information on these webinars or to register, please visit our website at organdonationalliance.org. Now, for anyone interested in obtaining continuing education credits, we are offering 1 CEP-C credit and 1 nursing contact hour for this webinar. Please note we do also offer a certificate of attendance for anyone seeking CEs that are not available. Everyone joining us today is entitled to claim either of these credits or certificates. Prior to receiving your certificate, you will be asked to complete a very brief online evaluation that will allow you the opportunity to provide us with your valuable feedback. If you're listening in a group, as many of you are, please be sure to get the evaluation email from your group lead. As a reminder, for nursing, you'll have 14 days to complete your evaluation and claim your credits, and for CEP-C, you'll have 30 calendar days. Now, as an added note, throughout the course of today's presentation, there is a video that will be shown. The sound from this video will only project through your computer speakers. So if you're listening to today's webinar via phone, please be sure to turn up the volume on your computer as well so that you'll be able to hear the discussion. Now, at this point in time, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. David Axelrod, Surgical Director of the Kidney, Pancreas, and Living Kidney Donation Program at University of Iowa Hospital and Clinics. Dr. Axelrod, thank you so much for joining us today, and at this time, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speakers.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for everybody taking the time out to join us. As we're all aware, the changes that are coming down the pike already for heart and lung and soon to be for liver, likely, and kidney are going to force us to develop strategies to better share organs across DSAs, to increase acceptance and communication between OPOs and transplant programs that don't work with each other traditionally, and really, I think, make it important for us to have technology tools that allow people to communicate in real time so that we can make best use of the organs. My goals for the session today were really to present 3 different tools that have been developed for this purpose. The first is the revision of the DonorNet Mobile application that UNOS has been working on over the last year or so. DonorNet Mobile, I think, is a very important tool for those of us who are up in the middle of the night taking donor offers, and I think really allows us to have a better understanding of where the organs are, how the organ system is evolving, and so that we can, as we have organs from multiple different DSAs and that sort of stuff, I think we're going to have a better ability to keep track of them in a remote, flexible environment. The second presentation will be Scott Rombach from Specialist Direct, talking about telepathology and some of the innovation that are coming along in that sphere. I think one of the issues that we all face is knowing that the quality of the imaging and the reads are sufficient to make a determination, and it's one thing if your team is going out to look at the organ yourselves, it's quite another if you're having to make determinations about organ acceptance without being able to actually see the films yourselves and being able to understand the quality of the pathology. And so Scott and his team have worked with some technology solutions that are currently employed in a number of DSAs around the country to improve the quality and the efficiency of communication of high-quality results. And our last speaker, we hope is Dalton Shaw. He's having some communication issues right now, but we're hoping we're getting those worked out. And he is the founder of a company that has created a HIPAA-compliant text application that is being used in a number of OPOs and transplant programs to really facilitate communication across organizations. Many of us continue to rely on things like text messaging, sometimes through the EMR, most often through somebody picking up a phone call to coordinate between OPOs and transplant programs and tissue typing labs and couriers and your coordinators and your surgeons and your fellows, and to being able to bring all those people together on one platform so that everybody's on the same page, I think is going to be really important, particularly when we deal with the increased complexity of trying to arrange to have things brought in and imported and all of that sort of stuff. So with that, I would like to turn the first part of the presentation over to Lloyd to present the innovative work that they're doing at UNOS. I've been fortunate enough to be part of the working group that has been able to see their hard work, and I think that all of us are going to recognize a substantial improvement compared to where the current DonorNet Mobile product is. So Lloyd, why don't you take it away, please?
Thank you very much, Dr. Axelrod, for that introduction. I think this webinar is very timely considering a lot of the initiatives that are underway here at UNOS over the past year. Today I'd like to talk in particular about two of those projects, the first of which being offer filters and the second one being what Dr. Axelrod alluded to, which is a new version of DonorNet Mobile for transplant centers. So to start, offer filters. This is a pilot initiative that we've started in 2019 involving participation from 29 kidney programs from around the country, very much focused on improving the offer screening technology and offer screening capabilities that are currently provided inside of UNET. So currently, waitlist allows for transplant hospitals to specify what's called donor acceptance criteria. For instance, centers can specify a maximum acceptable donor age that they are willing to accept organ offers from. There are two issues we'd like to address moving forward with that current model. The first of which deals with how the current donor acceptance criteria is actually implemented. So I think a lot of times we see transplant hospitals tending to enter very high values for things, again, like that maximum acceptable donor age, because they don't want to exclude healthy older donors. And so one of the problems that we have are that the donor acceptance criteria are currently evaluated and applied in isolation from each other, so that donor acceptance criteria for age is applied independently of other donor acceptance criteria. The second issue we'd like to address is actually when those criteria get applied. So right now in the current system, donor acceptance criteria are applied at the time of the match, when particular pieces of information may not yet be available that they would apply to. So offer filters is going to address these two things, and I'm going to tackle the first problem, this idea of how precise can I get with a candidate acceptance criteria, and in the current system you can't get that precise. You can't take them in conjunction together. So in the future state, we're going to introduce this idea of a multifactorial offer filter. And what that looks like, as a center, you may want to create a filter for organ offers being made to you that take into account the organ quality, but in conjunction with the distance at which that organ is being allocated from compared to where you are. So what that may look like is, as a center, you'd want to filter your kidney offers if they're coming from a donor with a KDPI greater than 50%. But you want to do that only if they're coming from more than 250 miles away, and maybe if the donor age is greater than 60 years. So you can already see here that there's a big difference between the donor acceptance criteria currently available in waitlist and where the future that we want to take this is for offer filters. We now have this idea of combining different criteria together in kind of in an additive fashion, building up these filters to specifically target the cohorts of offers that you would like to exclude from your center. Similarly, you could create an offer that deals with filtering off anything that is post-cross-clamp and coming from greater than 500 miles away, so maybe addressing anticipated cold ischemic times concerns at your center. One thing to note here is that these two offer filters, the idea of the filter for organ quality and distance and the idea of the post-recovery filter, can actually both be applied simultaneously. So any offer to your center that meets either one of these criteria could effectively be filtered off. The other big change and the other issue I alluded to was when these offers, or when these filters rather, get applied. So in the current system, donor acceptance criteria is applied at the time of the match run. The issue there is that certain data might not be available. So a lot of OPOs run matches pre-OR, which means they are effectively pre-cross-clamp. So if you have a donor acceptance criteria that revolves around cold ischemic time, that data will not be available at the time of the match, and that acceptance criteria will not get applied. Offer filters, on the other hand, are going to be applied at the time the OPO sends out an electronic offer notification, so at which point, hopefully, more of that data is available. So in this instance, the OPO is going to go in and send out an electronic organ offer, and in the future, they will be prompted to enter optionally any additional information that's become available. So in this case, if cross-clamp date and time are now available at the time of offer notification, the OPO can then enter that information, and the filter would then take effect at the time of notification. So you can see there that the first three offers, because presumably they had filters in place around cold ischemic time, were then bypassed on this notification. So one of the problems we kind of realized here at UNOS when we were sitting down to map out what these new offer filters would look like is that once you introduce this concept of combinatorial or multifactorial filters, the number of combinations and the number of values that you can plug and play, because remember, you can make these as complicated as you want, quickly kind of grows out of control. And we realized that centers would need some help figuring out where to get started with these filters. And so UNOS Research did a lot of modeling, and they did a lot of analysis. And for every center in the country, they looked over the past 2 years of acceptance history, of offer history, and created what are essentially recommended filters for any kidney program in the country. As part of that, we gave the 29 pilot kidney programs that are in this initiative access to a tool that allows them to play with that data. So this tool essentially allows them to go back over 2 years of offer history at their center and see what would have happened had they applied the recommended filters from UNOS or even their own custom filters over that time period. So in this particular instance, you can see that if the given filter, which I believe deals with any kidney coming from greater than 400 miles away, where the KDPI was greater than 80, would have filtered off 15,000 offers that this center received. Now, one of the specifications that UNOS Research had when recommending these filters to centers was that the filters could not filter off an offer that the center accepted over that 2-year period. So when you're looking at this recommended filter and seeing its impact on that historical cohort of data, those 15,000 offers were all offers that the center refused, and none of those offers were offers that the center accepted. So you can see it's a very potentially effective filter for that center to use. I think the second thing that this could be very useful for is as a tool for centers to evaluate their existing acceptance practices. So the other specification that research had when providing these recommended filters was that any offer the filters bypassed was eventually accepted at an alternative center. So these are offers that in this particular center's case, they all refused, but somewhere further down the line, another center accepted them. So it's a very useful tool for the center to potentially have a conversation around why are we refusing all of these offers that other centers are particularly taking, and do we need to reevaluate our acceptance practices? So where are we at right now with the offer filters pilot? In phase 1, which is just wrapped up, I believe, last week, we actually did not enable the bypass option, but we did allow centers, those 29 participating programs, to go in and create the filters that they would like to see or to use the UNOS recommended filters. So those filters weren't actually getting applied, but the centers could go in and fill out the information and create what they think would be an ideal filter or combination of filters in the future. Over that period, we have been tracking data, and we are going to provide reports back to those centers about what would have happened had the bypass option been enabled. So they've gone in and they've built their filters, and now we're collecting data, and we're going to give them a report saying, here's what, based on what you've selected, would have happened over that period of time. So that's wrapping up right now, and we're ramping up and figuring out when we're going to implement phase 2, where for those pilot participants, we will actually enable the bypass option and allow them to apply the filters based upon that report that they've received from phase 1. A little bit further down the line, we're going to do more research into different filter criteria that we might need to make available, particularly around candidates. So you can imagine at your center creating a center-wide filter for your kidney program, but you may want to exclude those candidates with high CPRA in order to make sure that they continue to receive offers, even the marginal ones that your filter would have caught earlier on. And so that's the offer filter pilot. The other project that Dr. Axelrod was talking about is a new version of DonorNet Mobile for transplant centers. So for anybody on the call who has taken call on behalf of transplant centers, receiving organ offers, you're probably familiar with an older version of DonorNet Mobile, so DonorNet on your mobile device, that we released around 2007, right around the time electronic offers became a thing. And that version, unfortunately, has not really aged well over the years. So if you flash forward to 2017, that version of DonorNet Mobile that we released in 2007, which was really catered toward a different generation of mobile devices, namely BlackBerries at the time, has not really kept up well with the modern smartphone era. So in 2017, we released a version of that application for OPOs. But as part of that, we really brought it up to modern smartphone standards, modern responsiveness and web design that you expect to see on any website that you visit on your phone. So we released that for OPOs and gave them some rudimentary functionality as well, including the ability to perform second ABO verification and the ability to upload secure images and view attachments. Over the course of this year, we have added increasing amounts of donor data, so everything that you see in DonorNet on the web, we've been slowly building that out from a donor record standpoint inside of the new mobile application. So that includes things like medical and social information, all the medical ads that you can see, attachments, ABGs, and event settings, and basically the idea being that eventually the entire donor record will be represented in a mobile capacity. All of that has been building up to that development of a brand new platform for transplant centers to review and receive and evaluate organ offers on their mobile device. As part of that, we established a large group of transplant center volunteers earlier this year that have been really helping us guide and drive this effort. And I want to focus on a lot of the contributions they've made to this new application design. In fact, when we set out to do this, we decided up front that everything we were going to do as part of this application development was going to be focused around the end user experience. And with that in mind, the working group that we established was really established to drive every aspect of design in the new application. So part of that, if you think of the landscape now and think of where DonorNet Mobile is and DonorNet in general is right now, you have transplant centers going to that old version of DonorNet Mobile that we released in 2007. You have OPOs going to a brand new version of DonorNet Mobile. Some people are on their computers. And I think going forward, the idea is that at least from a mobile experience standpoint, that everybody will be using the same application. So OPOs and transplant centers alike will be driven to one location and have a common view. Along with that comes this idea of viewing donor data. So again, right now in the current system, transplant centers have a particular view from a mobile device, and OPOs have a different view from a mobile device. And even if you log into DonorNet on a computer, on your laptop, the view of the donor record is slightly different from what a transplant center sees to what an OPO sees. They see the same data, but it is presented in just slightly different fashions. And one of the advantages of wrapping mobile inside of a single application is that we can now consolidate and make that view consistent between the OPO and the transplant center. So when they're on the phone together and they're talking about and discussing the donor, they're looking at exactly the same thing. And so it's things like that where the working group has proven invaluable. And just to give you an idea of how that working group kind of operates, they meet once a month, and again, they're across 17 different centers and third parties, those third parties being call centers typically that take call on behalf of transplant hospitals. And I think more so than any other project I can remember at UNOS, we have integrated the working group not just into the early requirements phase. I think that's common to all the projects we do, where we involve the community up front in figuring out what are the community needs. But this is the first time I can recall where we've involved the community in the actual development and design of the application. And so the working group has actually reviewed every single screen and every single workflow that we built inside of this application. And so some of the feedback that they've provided deal with things like how new offer notifications should be organized. So again, on a mobile device, it's a very different realm than being on your computer, and space is limited. You don't have a lot of real estate, and things need to be fairly responsive. And so one of the big pieces of feedback we got from them dealt with how the new notifications would be organized, but also what key pieces of information would appear when you see a new notification on your mobile device. Additionally, we talked a lot. I think we spent most of the summer talking about how to present the donor record in a mobile view. I think one of the early pieces of feedback that we received was a desire to have the ability to see trending data over time. So for this particular donor, what were their creatinine levels over time? How hemodynamically stable were they over time? And so that's something that we've incorporated into the mobile design, that ability to drill down deep into the donor record and actually see particular values and chronologically follow the donor in terms of their stay in the hospital. Additionally, the working group provides feedback on improvements to the offer notification lifecycle in general. So if you think of that phone call you get, the robotic voice on the other end of the line, one out of two times you can't press 1 immediately and you're waiting 30 seconds to hear the end of that call. So the working group provided feedback around that, and I think we've actually implemented changes to the way that notification system works just in the past month, allowing those calls to be a little bit shorter and allowing you to respond a little bit faster. And then finally, obviously, the big drive for a mobile version of DonorNet for transplant centers is to get to a response, is to allow people to enter responses on behalf of their candidates. And so the working group spent a ton of time reviewing and redesigning and helping us figure out what that page for the match results list for your center should look like on a mobile device, and what should the different flows be for responding on behalf of your candidates. So to get an idea of where we are with that pilot, we plan to release the pilot in Q1 of next year, and we anticipate that will run for about 3 months, baking in time for making sure that we've ironed out any kinks on the system, making sure that we have a full view of the donor record available to transplant centers, and making sure that we've fully come through any educational efforts that we'll need to provide. So I know those projects seem very different from each other. They're touching different areas and kind of catering to different ideas. But if you kind of imagine these as pieces in a larger puzzle, and I think the things that Scott and the things that Dalton are doing are also pieces in that puzzle, and that puzzle being, what is the future of transplantation? What does the future landscape look like? And so I think when you take this idea of enhanced offer screening via offer filters, and you combine that with the idea of easier evaluation and mobile access, mobility in general, when you combine those two concepts together and you put those two puzzle pieces together, what you're really leading to is this idea of faster placement. You're working your way down the match more efficiently. You're responding to offers more efficiently, leading to faster placement and less discards and better outcomes in general. Speaking of those puzzle pieces, I just want to call out, here at UNOS, we actually have, these are just two pieces or two initiatives that are ongoing, but if you go to unos.org, we actually have a recently published article, I believe, talking about 10 other initiatives that are going on that are very akin to these. One example being the Kidney Accelerated Placement Project, which deals with placing very hard-to-place kidneys via the UNOS Organ Center. The other one being the DonorNet Image Sharing Pilot, the goal there being very much providing a national kind of centralized hub for high-quality medical images, think DICOMs, inside of DonorNet. And so I encourage you to go out to unos.org and read more about these initiatives. Additionally, I know we're going to answer questions at the end of this, but if anything doesn't get answered, feel free to reach out to the UNET help desk at unos.org. And I want to thank you all very much for your time. And Dr. Axelrod, I will hand it back to you.
So thank you so much. I really want to congratulate Eunice for really stepping up. We've seen, over the last 3 or 4 years, the commitment to being focused on the end user, focused on helping us get the tasks, and I think in the end that's going to be reflected in better utilization of organs wherever they're coming from. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to let Scott talk a little bit about the projects that they've been working on at Specialist Direct and the ability to have, I think, better communication of one of the key aspects of accepting an organ, and that's the biopsy results.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Axelrod. So it's Scott Rombach. I'm the founder and CEO of Specialist Direct. I wanted to start off today with a story. So in the spring of 2013, I'm sitting in the office of my dermatologist. Living in sunny Los Angeles, I thought it was prudent to have kind of an annual checkup. So I'm sitting there, the dermatologist sees this small spot on my right cheek. She's looking at it and saying, well, not sure if we need the biopsy, but why don't we do so? Takes the biopsy, I don't think anything of it. The next day I get a call from the pathologist, and the news is that I have melanoma. So as you can imagine, everything is going through my mind, right? What is this? What's going to happen to me, etc. I end up going through a whole process of Mohs surgery. Literally they took about 100 stitches on the side of my right side of my face. And through this process, I learned a whole lot. Luckily, everything turned out fine. The margins were clean, no issues, and I made it through, and I feel blessed. But through this process, I learned a lot about diagnostics. I was part of one of the first teams to introduce centralized interpretations, primarily within the cardiac space, for echocardiograms for OPOs nationally. And one thing I didn't quite know, and that I learned from my experience, is when you get to the area of pathology, the variance of interpretation varies widely. In some modalities, there's a 30% error rate on these types of interpretations. And so when I look back, the impetus of the founding of Specialist Direct, telepathology was the cornerstone of the foundation of our entire company. And when you look at these challenges that are facing transplant centers and OPOs, some of the keys are the accuracy and the variance of interpretation. That relates across the board, not just for telepathology, but telecardiology as well. Also being dependent upon local hospital physicians to read cases. There could be situations, we've seen situations in rural areas or other areas where the pathologists or other specialists, they don't even feel confident in the interpretation. And some of that is the point 3, the lack of having the subspecialty in areas such as renal and liver, where they don't have that subspecialty expertise. The timeliness is always an issue that we've seen in surveying various OPOs, mainly because these cases, as we know, happen in the middle of the night, on holidays, on weekends, etc. So sometimes getting a specialist to read in the middle of the night, that I'm sure some of you may be sitting back to yourself and say, yeah, we had something happen last week where it was tough to get a read because it was in the middle of the night. Pathologists perhaps didn't want to wake up and go and do the interpretation. And then the access to images. We've talked about sharing of images, but we're seeing cases where it's not the fault of the OPO, but coordinators are having to snap cell phone pictures of images that clearly don't have the resolution for a pathologist to provide an accurate read. So the overall is really inefficiencies and inability to maximize the number of recoverable organs. So in terms of this exact impact, we're seeing on the kidney side in particular, we're seeing organs discarded that shouldn't be. We're seeing delays in transplantation. You can imagine, I hear from OPOs basically, they have a clean biopsy. Let's say it's a liver or kidney. They put the offer out, it's accepted, and then on the other OPO side, they do interpretation and get a completely different result. Then in other times, they have to go to more aggressive centers. So the inability and the inaccuracies and the variance is causing tremendous problems. From an ethical and legal standpoint, there's also situations where they think the organ's clean and it gets transplanted, and then it opens up for liability in terms of informed consent, ethical concerns, because they find out really these organs weren't what they thought they were, and that causes additional diagnostic studies to occur and additional payments because you're having more diagnostic interpretations down the road. So I wanted to make this a bit interactive, and so I had a polling question here, and it's a simple yes or no question for the group. Do you have any concerns regarding the accuracy of the interpretation within your organization as you receive studies such as liver, kidney, biopsies, or echoes, etc.? So just a quick yes or no, and we'll give it a few minutes. So just seeing the group out there today, if you have similar concerns related to these challenges in terms of the accuracy of the interpretation. So feel free, just a quick yes or no. And then I'll continue to move on. Related to the use of kidney biopsies, I've talked about the variability. We're lucky to have Dr. Axelrod on the call today. I'd like to have him specifically go through this slide in a little bit greater detail, but it talks about the biopsy variances that are so greatly in terms of interpretations.
So what we've been doing at ASTS is trying to develop some standards for when biopsies get used that are agreed upon across surgeons, nephrologists, and AOPO and the OPOs. And one of the reason we did that is that we see the rate of biopsy varying across the country from about 20% of allografts to 75% of allografts. And when you look at them, the underlying characteristics of the donors are not significantly different, suggesting that people are using the biopsies in very different ways. And we know that on the slide on the left, it shows that if you biopsy a kidney with a KDPI less than 20, there's about a 6 times greater likelihood that it's going to be discarded compared to a kidney that wasn't biopsied. And some of that is certainly appropriate because there's unrecognized disease. However, I think a lot of the times that we end up getting information from the biopsies that is incorrect, that leads to delay in placement of those organs and leads to potential discard of the organs. And we're all aware that there's a number of aggressive centers in New York and other places that are bringing in on kidneys, re-biopsying them because they don't believe the biopsy results that they're getting online, and then transplanting those kidneys. We've also had the converse, as Scott mentioned, of kidneys that were read as perfectly okay, transplanted, and then the final reading or the over-reading suggested there was significant disease. So we're really trying to come up with a system in which we get the right kidneys biopsied at the right time, avoid the biopsy of the kidneys that don't need them, and then get biopsy interpretations that are reliable for the ones that are biopsied, so we can make the best decisions. And so what are the tools that are possible to do that? And so we're going to move on and talk about those tools.
Thank you, Dr. Axelrod. So in terms of the clinical need, basically the key here is to have reliable readings, and that includes 24/7 access to the top board-certified specialists. We've talked about, in addition, real-time access to the images themselves, and this could be for the transplant surgeons or others within the OPO and clinical staff, and the ability to have easily transportable technology. That could be in a rural or urban setting. We've spent years here at Specialist Direct looking at various technology, in particular around some scanners related to telepathology, and the technology's changed dramatically where now, and I'm going to show you a video here in a bit, where it's portable, it's lightweight, durable equipment that can scan frozen section slides in a matter of minutes. So the equipment's made huge jumps, and that's going to provide huge benefits to the transplant community. With that, I wanted to have another question here. Would your organization benefit from real-time 24/7 interpretations of diagnostic studies, again, such as liver kidney biopsies by top board-certified specialists? So trying to get a feel from the group here of that type of service, would it be a benefit to you? Give a couple minutes here, have people fill that one out.
looked on the last one as people are filling it out that about 80% of people recognize that, at least in their OPOs or on their transplant programs, that there was issues with the quality of the readings that they were getting. So it looks like here we're at about 95% of people think that 24/7 specialty trained readings would be something that's useful and necessary for folks.
Thank you, Dr. Axelrod. And thank you for the group. So from a specialist direct standpoint, our focus is providing end-to-end solutions. These are all stat interpretations 24/7 of not only the specialist availability, but also having the cloud-based specific software that's designed for OPOs and transplant, the medical devices I mentioned, as well as having the entire support side, which is the training, the certification, and project management. The types of studies are really soup to nuts, everything required for the most part for that OPOs. That could be on the pathology side, liver, kidney biopsies that I mentioned, echocardiograms, x-rays, CTs, ECGs. So the access to the board-certified specialists, as well as the turnaround times and availability. Now, on the pathology side, I talked a little bit about my background in this. We wanted to make sure we utilize a partner in this area. We utilize WashU in St. Louis. They're really one of the gold standards in terms of pathology, over 25 plus board certified pathologists and subspecialists. They're our partners for the pathology side. The subspecialty is really a key. Having the liver, kidney subspecialists and folks that are expert in those particular modalities is critical, and also being available, could be in the middle of the night, to be able to discuss specific cases is part of this best practices for clinically speaking. Interpretations average about 30 minutes, and thousands of OPO cases for transplant have been interpreted by the WashU team over the years. Partly, as we all know, within the OPO community, having that centralized control and consistency, and even some moving to a surgery center / recovery center model to be able to control the process to improve recovery is all part of this. Basically having a team that you can lean on that's an extension of your team is part of the best practices related clinically to recovery rates increasing, and having the technology that's OPO specific. The final polling question here is related to, would your organization be willing to accept a slightly longer study interpretation time, say 30 to 60 minutes longer, if the result was significantly more accurate? And what that's alluding to, having a process where you upload the images to companies such as ours for interpretation versus having maybe a local rural pathologist read it or a local pathologist read it right on the spot. So having that expertise is at a value. We'll have a couple minutes. We have over 75% saying yes, that would be valuable as the results come in.
One of the things is, what would we be willing to tolerate in terms of increased cold time? But it looks like people are willing to accept a little extra cold time so that we can make sure that we get best and accurate results.
And then going through the process, basically there's several major steps or quick steps here. Basically, you're uploading the images to the cloud. From there, our 24/7 call center and our solution routes it. And really that's automated through our software, our cloud software, to the correct specialist for the interpretation. And then final report is provided. Now, related to these solutions, the cloud technology provides the ease in uploading the studies for coordinators and whomever that may be, the routing, as I mentioned, as well as the real-time sharing of images and reports. I touched on earlier, and we can talk through it a little bit in more detail. Here's an example of a scanner for a telepathology scanner that a number of the OPOs are using now. You can see it fits in the palm of the hand. It's portable. It utilizes whole slide imaging, so it's not a camera that requires manual stitching. It digitizes the images in minutes. And this is equipment that I said has come a tremendously long way, ISO certified. And with that, I was going to show a quick video here so you can see it firsthand. It's going to actually go through and show you the scanning process. And as you can see, none of it's manual. It's push button via cloud, and it's going to show how the results can actually be seen. So there's very little kind of user interaction. The machine does all the work. It's about a minute here, and it's going to go through here in a second to show you a little bit how the scanning works. So cloud-based, the ability to push a button, scan the frozen section, and this can be operated from an iPad, from a laptop, PC, etc. Really everything's browser-based. Shows a little bit about how the images are viewed. And gives you a feel of how quick and easy the digitization is now in terms of this process. And the size. When we talk about image sharing and interpretations, showing a couple examples here. I have the device I mentioned above, the scanner we utilize, and below is the ultrasound. That's an example of a laptop ultrasound device. Basically, everything's uploaded to the cloud. From there, either image sharing and the interpretations can be done via our automated system, and then the information shared, whether it be a final report or image with transplant surgeons, clinicians, staff, whomever you like, all done in real time. And from a benefits on the technology side, the cases can be uploaded easily, like I mentioned, and read by board-certified specialists on our team. And in addition, they can be shared through secure email or within DonorNet. So multiple options to do that. And ultimately, the organ placement is accelerated and discard reduced. Quick quote from Dave DeStefano, one of our clients who we are sharing Hope SC, talking about aligning strategically and really the need to provide the relevant information to transplant surgeons utilizing our pathologists. So summarizing some of the benefits, easy to use. In our pricing model, you pay for only what you use, and enables the control, as I mentioned, the recovery process to foster increased recovery rates, improve efficiencies, and faster in terms of speed allocation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the quick payback and ROI. From an economic standpoint, we find that the strategic OPOs and transplant facilities, they look at this as more of a revenue generation, not a cost. It's with a single incremental organ recovered, they're able to pay for the whole system. And even number two, faster allocation and improved efficiencies, payback is generally in several months. So because of the reimbursement structure, this is actually more of a revenue generation when you look at it. Obviously, the goal is to save lives, but when you look at the economics, tremendous economics for these types of solutions. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Axelrod.
Thanks, Scott. I think what you saw here is an example of where the technology can go. And when you think about what we heard from Yunus, DonorNet, imagine from my standpoint as a surgeon, I can get to, a specialist-read renal pathologist and then pathology, and I can actually click on it and see it on my mobile device and be able to say, yes, even though that organ is 400 miles away, it's worth importing it into my OPO, and I can then reliably report that and hopefully have the filters that are correct. Then once I make a decision, I want the organ, now how do I make the whole system work? And so we're going to turn it over to Dalton, who I see is online, which is great, to talk about a solution that potentially can help from the point of organ acceptance forward in terms of communication. So Dalton, CEO of OmniLife, we'll turn it over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, how's my volume? Good, louder, quieter?
Good.
Good. So thank you all in advance for your time today to learn a little bit about what we're working on. I see some familiar names as participants, so hello to those that have been collaborating with us and helping us really pioneer the industry in terms of how we reimagine how we communicate and collaborate. So just to dive right in, I am the CEO, co-founder of OmniLife. We have a marquee product called TXP Chat, and my connected purpose to transplant is I'm a nerve transplant recipient, and that kind of piqued my interest when I was in college to get into this industry and start doing research, where I met the co-founder, the technical co-founder of our company, who had 4 aunts waiting for life-saving liver transplants. One passed away while waiting, and as I was doing research in tissue and he was doing research kind of on the organ utilization data side as it relates to and MELD score and stuff with liver, we met each other at University of Iowa and started collaborating with the local center there, and also my uncle is a congenital heart transplant surgeon and really pointed my direction towards some of the problems we'll talk about today. But just acknowledgement of some of our research that we did. This just marks some of the organizations that formally participated in our NIH grants, and just a shout out for not only them but also others that are on the phone that I really do see as pioneers and leaders in the industry that we've had the pleasure of working with. I see my primary responsibility as a transplant entrepreneur to enable you guys, the ones with the ideas, too busy to maybe and oftentimes too busy to execute, and give you guys the technical resources to really affect change and do something that helps the community. And so before we begin, and just to kind of frame the conversation today, I want to think about the pain points for the group online today about the communication challenges around organ offers. So I do have a poll here. We'll give it a couple minutes or allow you guys to continue to vote on those things for the next, I don't know, maybe not a couple minutes just because we have 15 minutes, maybe a couple seconds. But go ahead and maybe, Dave, give me a cue, when we've got a meaningful number of submissions, we can move forward.
Give it another couple of minutes in terms of what are the pain points that your teams recognize. Sounds like everybody recognizes a number of these things, but changes in OR time, quickness and access to the recipient information, coordinating logistics are all significant issues that we see in coordination of an organ offer. All right, Dalton, I think you have your solution may come into play.
Yeah, so just to further frame, what I think it's always important when thinking about innovation and solutions too is understanding at a systems perspective what's happening and some of the changes that I think are increasing the need for communication, and focusing on and rethinking how we collaborate as parties. And these things are all things that you guys are all aware of and likely much more knowledgeable than I am about these different things. But new allocation changes obviously have brought new challenges, third-party payer pressures in terms of continually looking at ways to be more efficient and effective at an operational level, avoiding costly delays and mistakes, regulatory changes, and then also just an increase in focus and awareness of the importance of security and HIPAA compliance. The background to just talk about what we've done. This presentation, and I think as us as a company, we really, it reflects 3.5 years of a focus on research and communication, information exchange and sharing. I think it includes, both, what tools are people using, what are the processes that people are using, and where are the gaps. And through this field research, clear areas began to emerge, and we chose to focus on these key areas first, really the logistics, and then organ evaluation and acceptance, and getting the right information that you need quickly and easily. And just to read off the screen here, a little bit of the sub points under each of these areas is the communication, information sharing, the security, and just kind of extending out a secure channel to, you're working with, and even more so now, working with third parties or other partners, community partners, where you're coordinating or communicating with them, and there's oftentimes information that may not be the best idea to share over an unsecure platform. And then recovery, transplant logistics, setting OR. I saw that was a popular choice on the poll ahead of time. coordination with a number of different peers, not only internally with external peers. And so we really set out to map all of this out, and that was really what we did for this first NIH grant, is really to understand all those different relationships, understand what were some of those key challenges as it relates to the information exchange. And I think on the next slide, we basically collected all of that feedback into a recommendation from the industry in terms of if we had a tool that we could use, what would be some of those things that would be most important. One of it was mobile app, web-based. It had to be accessible. It had to be real time. Being able to have customize the notifications, to be able to stay aware on things that you want to stay aware about and not be over stimulated with areas that you find unimportant is really important. Need to be able to invite and expand that network and have the flexibility to include different parties at different times, whether that be internal departments or external. A simple interface, secure document. And I think some of the key points in my mind that came out of this is there's a lot of different tools. There's a lot of different, even the tools that we talked about today, the prior two conversations, there's a lot of different tools that is a very complicated process, a very complicated workflow, lots of people involved, lots of different tools and processes involved. How can we try to bring all those tools together? How do we bring things together in a simple interface that allows you to navigate to these tools easily and share information between these parties easily? So I think simplicity, accessibility, and then the complementary to existing workflows and being able to integrate to other existing tools that they already have, I think were the things that came up the most. And I think we really wanted to be able to have, through this process, we realized that there was, obviously everybody had a slightly different process. They say this with OPOs, and I think it's true for transplant centers too. If you've seen one OPO, you've seen one OPO, and the same goes for transplant centers. That very unique, but there were consistencies, fundamental consistencies across, and really what we came down to was the need and ability to collaborate real time and to share this information, and that seemed to be a fundamental value proposition that no matter, and that's what we did as a company, is really to try to focus on and help OPOs and transplant centers focus on their specific workflows, but then also the fundamental breakdowns, with each of the different processes. And I'll talk a little bit about the use cases. I think that will shed light to, and provide additional information on how we did this later in the slide. But the plan that we chose, which I think this is through a lot of trial and error, I do think that it does matter, not only the tool, but how you choose to implement it and how you get people on board. And that's something that I think we really learned with working with it. It's one thing to have a great tool, but it's, how do you maximize utilization and engagement within your teams to really see the ROI and affect change across an organization. And we did that through different phases where we really focused on internal communication around the comm center, communication between the teams, the procurement teams as it relates to the organ offer event, and transplant center, really kind of looking at, okay, what are the existing processes and how do we really break that down as it relates to the actual organ offer process? How do we really understand those dynamics and make sure everybody's educated and on board, everybody's aware of why we're doing this, and I think when you get that overall adoption internally, then it really allows you to start to think about expanding into other areas, and that's what we did next, to start to build the bridge with some of those other important areas, whether it be an external comm center, your partner OPO or respective transplant center, vice versa, HLA, starting to think about communication a day of transplant with the patient for transplant center size and procurement and recovery. Again, medical couriers, medical examiners, funeral directors, there's a lot of different ideas that came up. And also, obviously, we then, phase 3, which is kind of ongoing, is obviously centers and organ procurement organizations have gotten creative on where they could expand in the future. So in terms of the doing and how we actually implemented and did this was we had them download a communication application that's happened to be TXP chat. And I'll talk about several of the use cases that I think are most powerful as it relates to the organ offer efficiency. So, and communication around that process. So use case number one, I know we have a different mix of people on the phone, so I'll try to be aware of that and go from multiple perspectives. But for the organ offer, this was all about connecting, collaborating, and then documenting these conversations. And so this is, as you go down, from an OPO's perspective, for example, we do offer an ability that you could drag and drop the iTransplant file, XML file that you take to UNet and put it in the TXP chat web, and that would then just help with the initial outreach process. It's not meant, so you put the document in and it helps with the next part that I'll be talking about later. But we do offer a way to transfer a lot of that donor information for the OPO making an offer. Then you can proceed with the normal process. So you go through UNet and everything with UNet and everything that you currently do, we make sure still happens the same. This part is really what we've seen really valuable for organ procurement organizations that do import for a transplant center or organ procurement organizations that reach out directly to the surgeon or a large, internal comm center. There are essentially, the way that we thought about this was how do we create additional value, understanding that, there's UNOS Mobile. We don't want to necessarily replicate or be a UNet Mobile. We don't want to include all the information. Really, how do we create that consistency in the communication, that outreach, and how do we improve communication and collaboration between parties, even if maybe, especially with new allocations and being new partners and also turnover with staff, how do we keep that relationship strong, and how can we offer some of that custom communication? So really what we did is, as a center and even as an individual, whether you're a doctor or a pre-transplant coordinator, you can put in your communication preferences, which just lets people that that are going to be reaching out to you understand how to effectively communicate with you. And you see an example of that on the screen. But then we also, for surgeons that take offer or even transplant centers that may want to standardize how they review initial organ offers and just want everybody to communicate to that in the same way, we have a snapshot preview. We call it a snapshot in the sense that we only want to see 10 or 12 at most variables here that give you initial understanding and within a couple seconds at a glance to give an idea of okay, is this something that I'm really interested in? And then provide links to UNet, provide links to other tools that you want to see, whether it be DICOMs or other images in that. So it's just a one-stop shop for the people that are reviewing as a team, being able to add in people real time, and collaborate real time as a group. And there's a lot of functionalities that I frankly don't have time to go into today, but essentially how can we get everybody on the same page quickly and efficiently, and then give them information, the links to information to go look for additional information. And we really just focus on, the time and try to make things more efficient and effective, and speed things up, and give that custom feel, even if you might be working with somebody that you've never worked with before. I think best practice is to include a link to UNet, and right now this takes you to the UNet login screen, and I think, looking at what UNet Mobile and just kind of seeing the presentation earlier, I think it would really be great, and I think the community would agree too, and just some of the people that we talked to, is that if it could just take you right into UNet Mobile to that case instead of login page, which I think is oftentimes the issue. Now I really see how these are complementary, where you can go look for additional information quickly and accessibly on your mobile phone about the donor, and you can come back and communicate real time on that case and navigate between the two tools. I think that really could create a lot of value. And so we're looking into those types of opportunities. Go ahead.
No, I said I was going to say the thing that I think is important is you see the bottom set of questions. I often, you review an offer and you have three questions. What are the serology? Can I get a liver biopsy? And something else. And being able to communicate, sort of seamlessly without having to hit a number, call the coordinator, have the coordinator pick up the phone when she's also in the middle of trying to deal with four of the things, and and then also be able to have a record of when you ask for things and that sort of stuff, I think is an advantage of a consolidated platform. So let me finish up in the next minute or two, and then I do want to have some time for feedback. Dalton, and I'm sorry, it's got
no worries.
but I wanted everyone to get a couple of different examples of the things that are out there.
Of course, and you already touched on this slide, which is now we do organ offer reviews too, and so a popular use case is you pull the report, you look at the decline code, then everybody pulls out their phones and their chat app, or TXP chat in this case. You plug in the UNOS ID number, you pull up the case, and you do a case review as a team, and that's when you can see some of those follow-on questions and all that contextual information that's not maybe necessarily in UNet and probably isn't effective to be in UNet, but it gives you a clearer picture, and I think that's really what can affect quality improvement. And best practice here is I think you use a combination of through or out reports, you use their organ filters tool that they have available for transplant centers, and then you use TXP chat conversational data to really provide a detailed overview and really have all levels of the case to reference. And again, this chart correction, I think for organ procurement organizations, being able to use the administrator portal, go back and forth between what's in UNet or DonorNet, what's in iTransplant, and what's been communicated. If there's any things, you can always look back at the cases, like Dave had says, and that's another benefit of having things documented. And then obviously we have analytics about communication. How long does it take for a certain surgeon or coordinator to respond? We've even got to the details of, is there certain, on coordinators that are consistently performing better with certain surgeons? Is there a way that we can learn from what they're doing or how they're communicating that's affecting such good results? And how do we become more effective, both as an OPO or as a transplant center, and have some helpful metrics that you can take a look at, and really just trying to provide you all the information that you need to continually improve as a center. So, yeah, turn it over to you, Dave. Thank you, everyone.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Dalton. I apologize for everyone for the whirlwind through this, but I really wanted to have an example for folks that are thinking about how to improve organ acceptance. What are we going to do to deal with the increasing challenges out there that broader sharing will have to make sure that the organs are maximally utilized? I think the advantages of the DonorNet improvements and the organ screens are hopefully that we're getting the offers to the right time and having the ability to react to them in real time. I think one of the things we all recognize is we don't want organs that could be transplanted. Nothing's more frustrating than getting the organ offer that could have been transplanted at 4 hours and you get it at 12, and then it's still got to get here and you say, I can't take that risk. The opportunity to have real-time feedback, good quality images, real biopsies that you can feel comfortable with putting the kidney in and not feeling that you have a need to rebiopsy those kidneys, I think is going to improve the quality of the reporting you're getting. It's going to improve the ability of surgeons to accept offers, particularly offers that right now might fall into one of those screens that you heard about at the beginning. And then finally, I do think that we really need to evolve a system where the communication moves beyond what many of us continue to use, which is texts and phone calls and lack of sort of an organized common communication platform. And we really need, especially as we move beyond the usual dyad of your DSA where they know your practices and you know their practices, to where we're getting organs from multiple places and you guys are placing organs at multiple centers, many of which are not familiar with you guys. So what I hope today was to show you a few of the tools that were out there to perhaps pique some interest in exploring some of those things, and hopefully if there's anybody has any questions about things that they saw that would be useful for them or things that they thought would potentially impede organ acceptance, if you guys could let us know now. I think we can probably take an extra, hopefully about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll let everybody get back to their day.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Axelrod, and thank you, Lloyd, Scott, and Dalton, for such a great presentation. Just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions or comments for either of our presenters, please feel free to submit them using the chat feature. Again, that's going to be located in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Also, during this Q&A... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say...
You want to...
During the Q&A session, I'm just going to have this poll up for those of you that are listening in a group. If you could just complete the poll and let us know how many people are actually participating in your group, that would be greatly appreciated. Dr. Axelrod, did you want to take over?
Yeah, I wanted to kick it off. I just wondered if we could maybe ask Lloyd, from the experience so far for the filter projects, how how have people been using it, and what's your people's initial feedback when they looked at the what-if examples and that sort of thing? Floyd may be muted still.
Sorry, I was trying to talk and I was muted. So I'm going to turn that over to Rob McTeer, who's one of our business architects here at UNOS. I haven't been directly involved with the Offer Filters project, and I think he probably has the best expertise to answer that question.
Sure. So we actually just finished the data collection for the Offer Filters Phase 1 pilot on the 2nd of October. So right now we're analyzing the results of that, and we're going to be providing that data back to the participating kidney programs later this month, and getting their feedback on that. So
terrific.
We'll
still in progress.
Yes.
Maybe Scott can answer, because I think everybody, obviously looks at at cost as a barrier. For the portable scanner, kind of what's the for an OPO that was interested in purchasing, 1, 2, 3, what can you give us a ballpark estimate of what the scanner would cost an organization to deploy?
Yeah, the scanners are in the $20K range, but the good news is we have all types of programs in terms of rental, lease to own, that brings the price, on a monthly basis much lower. So all types of different programs, and we haven't really had any OPOs or facilities that the cost was an issue related to the technology because of the portability. And one thing I didn't emphasize was the fact that they can take these to the partner hospitals and do everything there. And so that really provides a great driver in terms of payback.
Terrific. Well, I'm excited, and I'm excited to see you guys expand into other things. I know that, echo, potentially real-time bronchoscopy, that sort of stuff, which can sometimes be a problem for centers for OPOs to get in real time and that sort of stuff. And then, Dalton, I think you mentioned it, but, for the organizations that you guys are working in, you sort of talk about, in a typical organ offer, kind of who all can be involved in a check. When you think of sort of, from the beginning with an OPO making an offer all the way through to that patient getting into the hospital, who have you seen involved, and how have you seen those chats working for them?
Yeah, for the organ, offer piece, there's obviously different ways. I think the key ways, there's, OPO to direct to center, and then within that, there's the internal comm centers or the surgeons, and then there's the organ procumerization that would work with a third party like Buckeye. And we have seen there's differences in terms of how the tool is basically used, but we have been able to have the tool be modified to be successful in each one of those scenarios. So it's not dependent on one of these people using the tool. We've got guest invites that also allow you to really expand it. So we really just want to make sure that it's clear that despite the workflows, and that's part of what we like to do, is just understand how you're currently doing it, and then make sure that we minimize as much change. But other people that have been included, and like I said, we do this through external invites. So people that don't have the app, you can send them an invite, and it sends them a link via text, and then they use that link. It takes them to a URL or a web-based version of the tool. It looks like they're in an app, but they're not. And from your end, as an app user, you can't tell the difference either. So it's and everything's documented, and you can tell when they open stuff, et cetera. So that's helpful when being able to expand it and really innovate within your center or within your organization in terms of how else can we have this tool help us either collect information or streamline communication. HLA, we've seen the different OR, so having a lead person, it kind of depends on the size of your center. Within OR, though, being synced up with the tool to help with OR change, different medical couriers that you may bring on as a temporary guest. It's really flexible to however you want to utilize it within your organization. And I'm excited to continue to see, our early partners and others to continue to use the tool and expand it into other innovative areas and innovative groups. Yeah.
Sounds terrific. So thanks for answering that. So all in all, what I hope that people took away from this is that there are some tools that may be worth exploring at the individual center level, at the OPO level, at the level of regions as we think about how to, get organs placed more rapidly. We saw through the slide from Dalton that all of us have very common pain points, and pain points are really the opportunity to use technology solutions to improve them. Again, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for taking the time. I'd like to thank the folks who are out there in the audience for listening. And if there are feedback or questions in the future, please let us know. And I'd like to thank at the end Deanna for all of your help keeping things organized and helping us stay on track and organize and present the information. So thanks again, everybody, and enjoy your day.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And I'd just like to echo Dr. Axelrod's thoughts there. Just extending sincere thanks to Lloyd, Scott, and Dalton for joining us today and providing some insight into the resources that your respective organizations have to offer. And additionally, I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to Dr. Axelrod for facilitating this discussion and ultimately moderating today's webinar. So thank you all for your participation. We're truly appreciative. And to all of our participants, as always, we thank you for your time. And for those of you who have hung out with us, I know we've gone a little bit over the hour, so I thank you for hanging in with us to finish the discussion. So we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.